The first time Adrian Cross looked at me, I had the ugly feeling he already knew I was there to destroy him. I was 3 weeks into an undercover federal operation, using the name Evan Ward in a borrowed resume to get close enough to find financial records that could put Cross away for the rest of his life. My job was simple on paper: earn access, locate the evidence, get out. Then Adrian caught the first crack in my cover and rewarded me with a key to his private floor. "You came through the south garage?" he asked. We were standing inside his office, 40 stories above downtown, with rain sliding down the windows behind him. "That's right." His eyes stayed on mine. Calm, dark, patient. "Interesting. It's been closed since Monday." My pulse jumped once. I kept my face still. "Then your receptionist gave me the wrong entrance." "She doesn't make mistakes." I held his gaze because looking away would have been worse. Adrian Cross had built his reputation on noticing what other men missed. He wore a charcoal suit without a tie, no visible weapon, no need to prove he belonged in the room. Everything around him already did that. The silent guards outside, the locked cabinets, the people who lowered their voices when he passed. He let the silence stretch until it became its own question. Then he opened a desk drawer, removed a black access card, and slid it toward me. "You'll need this." I looked down at it. No company logo, no printed name, just a silver stripe. For what? The private elevator, records level, executive conference rooms. That was more access than the operation had expected me to earn in a month. I should have felt victorious. Instead, every instinct I had told me not to touch it. Adrian's mouth shifted at one corner. Not a smile. More like he had noticed my hesitation and filed it away. "You wanted access," he said. Was I wrong? I picked up the card. "No good." He turned toward the windows, dismissing me without saying so. I made it halfway to the door before he added, "Evan." I stopped. "Try not to get lost tomorrow." The words were ordinary. His tone wasn't. Outside his office, I slipped the card into my jacket and forced myself to breathe. Normally, one of his security men watched me pass without expression. I gave him the same bored nod I had practiced in the mirror that morning. Nothing to see. Just a risk consultant with an expensive briefcase and a bad habit of checking exits. The elevator doors closed, and I looked at my reflection in the polished steel. "Smooth," I muttered. The man in the mirror looked unconvinced. My cover said I specialized in internal fraud and corporate theft. It was close enough to my real work that I could answer technical questions without hesitation, but far enough from the truth to keep anyone from finding Ethan Mercer beneath it. The problem was Adrian had not asked technical questions. He had watched my hands, my eyes, the way I positioned myself where I could see both the door and the reflection in the glass. He had caught one inconsistency and, instead of pushing me out, had opened another door. That made no sense. Men like Adrian protected information. They did not hand strangers access to rooms where secrets lived. Back at the temporary apartment the bureau had rented under my alias, I placed the card on the kitchen counter beside a takeout container I had forgotten to refrigerate. The noodles had become one solid brick. I stared at them for a second, considered whether hunger had standards, then threw them away. My handler's instructions sat encrypted on a phone hidden inside a cereal box. Maintain cover. Map access. Do not attempt extraction until authorization. I typed a short update stating that Cross had granted limited executive clearance. I left out the garage mistake. I told myself it was because I had corrected it cleanly. The truth was less comfortable. I did not know how to explain why Adrian had noticed the lie and let me stay. The next morning, I arrived early. Adrian was already in the private conference room, reading a file with a cup of black coffee beside him. A second cup sat across the table. "You assume I drink coffee?" I asked. "You bought one yesterday." That was for the cover. His gaze lifted. Of course it was. Dry humor was not what I expected from a man under investigation for moving millions through shell companies. I sat, keeping the untouched cup between us. Adrian closed the file. "Someone inside my organization is leaking information." That sentence tightened every muscle in my back. He watched me carefully, then pushed the file across the table. "Find out who." I rested my hand on it, but did not open it yet. "You trust me with an internal investigation after one meeting?" No, the answer came easily. Trust would be careless. Then why me? For the first time, something almost human crossed his face. Curiosity, maybe. Or amusement. "Because you notice doors before people," he said. And because you lied to me without insulting my intelligence. My fingers went still on the file. Adrian leaned back, perfectly calm. Don't look so worried, Evan. If I wanted you gone, you wouldn't be sitting here. It was not a threat. That was what made it worse. I opened the file because Ethan Mercer had a mission, and because walking away now would raise more questions than staying. Inside were access logs, account transfers, and names I had never seen before. Not the evidence we needed, but close enough to smell it. Adrian rose and adjusted his cuff. You have 48 hours. And if I fail, he paused at the door. Then I learned something useful about you. He left me alone with a file I had no business seeing and a key card I had not earned. I had come inside Adrian Cross's world to watch him. By the end of that morning, I was no longer certain which of us was under observation. The file Adrian Cross had left in front of me looked ordinary until I stopped reading it like an accountant and started reading it like a liar. Access logs had been altered in neat, almost invisible ways. 1 minute missing here. A door opening before its listed user arrived. A transfer approved from a terminal that had supposedly been offline. Whoever was leaking information knew the system well enough to hide inside routine. I spent the next 6 hours alone in the conference room, following discrepancies through payroll records and security reports while the black coffee Adrian had bought me turned cold. By noon, I had one name, Noah Bell, a junior financial analyst with limited access and no obvious reason to risk his life. That made him either very brave or very desperate. Adrian returned without knocking. He glanced at the untouched coffee. You don't trust anything I give you. I trust the coffee. I question your motives. That sounds exhausting. It keeps me employed. A faint shift touched his mouth, gone before I could decide whether it counted as amusement. He set a second folder beside my hand. You found Bell. It was not a question. I looked up. You already knew? I knew where you would look. There it was again, that quiet certainty that made me feel less like an investigator and more like a piece being moved across a board. I closed the file. Then why bring me in? Because knowing where to look isn't the same as understanding what you find. He nodded toward the folder. Inside were hospital invoices, rejected insurance claims, and a series of messages sent to Bell from an encrypted number. The threats were simple. Provide meeting schedules, or his younger brother would disappear before the next surgery date. I read the messages twice. He wasn't selling information. He was still giving it away, Adrian said. His voice stayed level, but the room seemed smaller around it. That distinction matters to judges. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Too clean. Too legal. Not the language of a private fraud consultant. Adrian's eyes settled on me. Does it? I kept my expression neutral. It matters to anyone who prefers facts to theater. Silence stretched between us. He had heard the mistake. I knew it from the way he became still. Adrian never fidgeted when he was thinking. He simply removed every unnecessary movement until the other person filled the space for him. I refused. Finally, he looked down at the messages. Bell is waiting downstairs. You brought him here? He works for me. That wasn't my question. Adrian's gaze lifted again. No, it wasn't. 10 minutes later, Noah Bell sat across from us with both hands locked together so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He looked younger than his file photo. Terrified, but trying not to show it. Adrian placed the printed messages on the table. Noah's face collapsed before Adrian. Said a word. I'm sorry, he whispered. I never gave them account numbers. Just schedules. Rooms. Who was meeting who? You gave them enough, Adrian said. Noah swallowed. They had my brother. I watched Adrian carefully. Every report I had read said he made examples of betrayal. Swiftly. Publicly. The practical choice was obvious. Remove Noah permanently, scare everyone else into obedience, then feed false information through the compromised channel. Ruthless, efficient, useful. Adrian leaned back. Your building has been watched for 9 days, he said. Noah went pale. My brother was moved this morning. Noah stared at him. So did I. Adrian continued. The hospital debt is handled. You will resign today. You will leave the city with him tonight, and you will never contact anyone in my organization again. Noah's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Why? He finally managed. Adrian's expression did not soften. Because fear explains your decision. It does not excuse it. The distinction landed harder than mercy would have. Noah nodded quickly, tears gathering in his eyes. Adrian stood. A car will take you home. When the door closed behind him, I remained seated. You're letting him go. I'm removing a vulnerability. You could have used him and taught every frightened man under me that honesty is more dangerous than betrayal. Adrian adjusted his cuff. That would be inefficient. It was a cold explanation for a choice that had cost him leverage, money, and the satisfaction of punishment. Maybe that was why I almost believed it. You knew he was being coerced before I found the messages, I said. I suspected. You still gave me the file. I wanted to see what you did with the difference between guilty and useful. My pulse tightened. And you hesitated before condemning him. He moved toward the door, then stopped beside my chair. That is either a strength or a liability. I haven't decided. You evaluate everyone like this? Only people who lie to me professionally. My eyes met his. The room went very quiet. Then Adrian placed a small drive on the table. The encrypted number that contacted Bell routed through North Point Holdings. Find out what. North Point was one of the shell companies my task force had flagged months ago, but never managed to connect directly to Adrian. I looked at the drive, then back at him. You're giving me another lead. I'm giving you work. There's a difference? There should be. He left before I could answer. I picked up the drive and felt the weight of the decision hiding inside something no larger than my thumb. Adrian had noticed my legal language. He had tested how I judged a frightened employee. Then he had handed me a link to a company the Bureau had been trying to penetrate. None of that made him innocent. If anything, it proved how carefully he chose every move. But I could no longer pretend those choices were simple. By the time I left the building, I had a useful lead, a damaged cover, and a question I could not file away as professional curiosity. I had been sent to discover what Adrian Cross was hiding. Instead, I was beginning to wonder what kind of man he became when cruelty would have been easier, and why he seemed so interested in what kind of man I would choose to be. By midnight, the North Point drive had given me enough to justify walking away, and just enough to make me stay. 3 encrypted payment chains connected the shell company to Halcyon Security, a private contractor the Bureau had suspected for months. It was not the evidence that could destroy Adrian Cross, but it was the closest anyone on my task force had gotten. My handler's message appeared on the secure phone at 12:17 a.m. If Cross challenged your cover, we can extract you before morning. I stared at the words while the apartment refrigerator rattled behind me. Adrian had caught my legal phrasing, tracked how I entered his building, and predicted exactly where I would look in Bell's records. Any reasonable agent would have reported the cover compromised. Instead, I typed, no direct challenge. Continuing operation. It was technically true, which was the kind of sentence people used when they wanted a lie to feel professional. The next morning, Adrian's driver was waiting outside my building. I had never given Adrian that address. My hand paused on the car door. The driver glanced at me through the open window. Mr. Cross said you'd spend 30 seconds deciding whether this was surveillance or transportation. I checked my watch. 27 seconds. Tell him his confidence is irritating. He said you'd say something like that, too. I got in because refusing would confirm more than accepting, and because I had already made the real decision the night before. The car took me to a North Point warehouse near the river, where Adrian stood beneath flickering fluorescent lights with his coat folded over one arm. He handed me a paper cup. I looked inside. Tea. What happened to the coffee? I asked. You let 2 cups die untouched. Maybe I enjoy wasting your money. Then you're doing it too slowly. I took the tea. It was exactly the kind I bought for myself when no one was watching. That should not have felt intimate. It did. Adrian turned toward a glass office overlooking the loading floor. North Point approved 6 payments through a supervisor named Daniel Ruiz. Ruiz says his credentials were copied. And you believe him? Belief is not an audit method. That almost sounded like something I'd say. I know. The answer came too quickly. Inside the office, Daniel Ruiz sat beside a stack of printed records, his jaw tight and his knee bouncing beneath the table. He looked angry rather than frightened. On the wall monitor, security footage showed him entering the building on nights when the disputed payments were approved. Adrian placed a pen beside the paperwork. Sign the findings, he told me. I read the summary. It named Ruiz as the source of the unauthorized transfers and recommended immediate detention by Adrian's security team. The footage was clear. The access logs matched. The paperwork gave me an easy answer. Too easy. I looked through the payment timestamps again. The approvals happened 9 minutes after he entered. Correct, Adrian said. And the terminal? Executive office upstairs. I turned to Ruiz. How long does the freight elevator take from this floor to executive level? For minutes if it's empty. And security? Badge check at both ends. I faced Adrian. Then either he sprinted through 2 checkpoints, approved 6 transfers, and returned without appearing on another camera, or someone used his badge while he stayed down here. Adrian's expression remained unreadable. The footage shows him entering. It doesn't show him upstairs. I pushed the summary away. I'm not signing this. Ruiz stopped bouncing his knee. Adrian looked at the unsigned page, then at me. You were hired to identify the leak. I was hired to identify the right one. Ruiz's badge authorized the payments. Then investigate the badge. That will take time. So does cleaning up after the wrong man. The room went quiet. Ruiz watched Adrian as if waiting for a sentence. Adrian could have ordered me to sign. He could have reminded me whose building I was standing in or what happened to men accused of betraying him. Instead, he picked up the paperwork and tore it once down the middle. Check the badge system, he told the security chief by the door. No one touches Ruiz until Mercer finishes. My heartbeat stumbled at my real last name, or what sounded like it. Adrian's gaze shifted to me. Ward, he corrected smoothly. Unless you've changed it since breakfast. The security chief left. Ruiz released a breath. I could not tell whether Adrian had made a mistake, tested me, or watched my reaction for exactly the result he wanted. You enjoy that, I said once Ruiz had been escorted out. What? Leaving people unsure whether you almost exposed them. Adrian's eyes held mine. Only when uncertainty makes them honest. We spent the next 2 hours inside the badge control archive. A duplicated credential had been created under Ruiz's name, then deleted from the active system. The deletion authorization came from North Point's executive network, not the warehouse floor. It narrowed the leak to someone with higher access and connected Halcyon security directly to the payment chain. A real lead. A dangerous one. Adrian leaned against the desk while I copied the relevant account numbers into the working file. You could have signed the report, he said. It would have ended the problem. It would have ended the wrong man. Most people prefer an answer they can use. Most people aren't paying me. Enough to be lazy. I'm paying you very well. Then imagine the quality you're getting. A quiet laugh escaped him before he could stop it. It lasted less than a second, but it changed his face enough to make me forget what I was about to say. Adrian recovered first. He removed a silver card from his pocket and placed it beside my hand. Unlike the first one, this card carried no access restrictions. North Point records, executive archives, internal security, he said. You'll report directly to me until we find who built the duplicate credential. I stared at the card. Taking it would move me deeper than the operation had planned. It would also place the evidence we needed within reach. You're giving me unrestricted access after I refused your conclusion. I'm giving it to you because you refused it. I looked at him. That sounds dangerously close to trust. It isn't. His voice stayed calm, but his attention did not move from my face. Trust would require me not to know what you'll do with it. I picked up the card. Adrian's gaze dropped briefly to my hand, as if he had expected that decision long before I made it. By then, I had a legitimate reason to withdraw, a secure path back to the Bureau, and enough information to prove the operation was progressing. I chose none of them. I followed Adrian toward the private elevator with unrestricted access in my pocket and the uncomfortable certainty that he understood my choices before I did. The danger was no longer that Adrian Cross was pulling me closer. It was that I had stopped pretending I wasn't choosing the distance myself. The private elevator opened onto a floor that did not exist on North Point's directory. Adrian stepped out first, then glanced back when I stayed inside half a second too long. Second thoughts? He asked. I'm deciding whether unrestricted access is generous or suicidal. Let me know when you decide. The doors closed behind us. The executive archive was smaller than I expected. No endless shelves, no dramatic vault, just a secured room with 3 terminals and a wall of locked document cabinets. Adrian placed his hand on a biometric reader. The system accepted him, then asked for my new access card. When I scanned it, every directory on the nearest terminal opened. Financial transfers, security credentials, executive schedules. Enough information to ruin careers, expose alliances, and possibly end my operation in one night. You're staying? I asked. Do you need supervision? No. Then I'm staying for the conversation. That was Adrian's version of humor, dry enough to leave a mark. I sat at the terminal and traced the duplicated badge back through North Point's administrator logs. Adrian took the chair beside me instead of standing over my shoulder. Close enough to watch, far enough that I still had room to move. It should not have mattered. It did. The false credential had been created through a dormant administrator token assigned to an executive account. The creation record was gone, but the deletion left a shadow entry in the backup system. I reached for the hidden audit file, then stopped. A thin red border had appeared around the window. "Don't touch anything," I said. Adrian's hand froze over the desk. That sounded like an order. "Enjoy it while it lasts." I leaned closer to the screen. The file carried a remote wipe trigger. Opening it normally would destroy the backup and notify whoever had planted it. I could have let that happen. The Bureau already had enough from the North Point drive to keep the operation alive, and a wiped archive would have weakened Adrian's internal security. Instead, I pulled a cable from the terminal and isolated it from the building network. "Someone expected you to find this," I said. "They wanted to know when you did." The head of security entered when Adrian summoned him. He took one look at the disconnected terminal and then at me. "His devices need to be searched." My secure phone was hidden in a false SIM inside my briefcase. A search would not merely damage my cover. It would end it. Adrian's expression did not change. "Ask him." The security chief frowned. "Sir, you want to search him?" "Ask." The man looked at me. "Mr. Ward, will you surrender your phone in case?" "No." His jaw tightened. "Then we have a problem." "You have an answer," Adrian said. "Those aren't the same thing." The security chief stared at him, clearly waiting for the order that never came. Adrian nodded toward the door. "Clear the room. No one accesses this floor until Ward finishes." When we were alone again, I looked at him. "You just overruled your security chief for someone you said you don't trust." I protected the integrity of the audit. By not searching me. By not pretending consent exists after a man with a gun asks a question. That answer landed somewhere I had not prepared to defend. Adrian turned back to the terminal. "Can you preserve the file?" "Probably." "That is not reassuring. Neither is your personality, but I've adapted." His quiet laugh came easier this time. I isolated the trigger, copied the audit shadow into a clean environment, and reconstructed part of the deleted record. The executive token had accessed more than payment systems. It had opened Adrian's private calendar, transportation routes, and meeting locations. Whoever was inside North Point was not simply moving money. They were mapping him. "You need to change your schedule," I said. "That's not part of your assignment." Neither was keeping your archive from erasing itself. Adrian studied me for a moment. "Why warn me?" The professional answer was that a dead target could not lead me to evidence. It was also incomplete. "Because whoever did this is using people as disposable tools," I said. "I don't like easy answers that leave the wrong person paying for them." Something in Adrian's face went still in a different way. "Not suspicion. Recognition." "Neither do I," he said. It was the closest either of us had come to saying something personal. I returned to the recovered log before the silence became more honest than I could manage. We found a routing code linked to Halcyon security and a series of scheduled data transfers hidden inside maintenance windows. It was not enough to identify the person behind them, but it proved the leak sat higher than Daniel Ruiz and closer to Adrian than Noah Bell ever had. I saved the working file to Adrian's internal system. A second directory flashed briefly beneath it, private correspondence, unprotected for less than a second. I could have opened it. Adrian was looking at the wall monitor, not at me. One click might have given the Bureau more than months of surveillance. I closed the directory instead. When I looked up, Adrian was watching my reflection in the black screen. Neither of us mentioned what I had chosen not to do. An hour later, he set a paper bag beside me. "Eat." "Is that an order?" "A medical observation." Inside was a turkey sandwich, plain chips, and no mayo. Exactly what I ordered when I was working late and did not want to think about food. I looked at him. "You've been studying my lunch. You're less mysterious than you believe." That's comforting. It wasn't meant to be. We ate in the archive while the recovered data processed. For 10 minutes, Adrian Cross was simply a tired man removing pickles from his sandwich with unreasonable concentration. I hated how much that made me like him. Then the terminal chimed. A hidden access report had finished compiling. At the bottom was a list of users who had opened the North Point executive network during the past month. My alias appeared twice. Once for the access Adrian had granted me. Once 3 days before I had ever entered the building. I stared at the date. Adrian did not. That's impossible, I said. Most useful things are at first. Someone created activity under my name before you hired me. Apparently. His calm was wrong. Too complete. You don't seem surprised. Adrian folded the sandwich wrapper and placed it neatly inside the bag. Surprise is rarely useful. I turned toward him. Did you know that entry was there? He met my eyes without answering. The silence changed everything. I had spent 3 parts of this operation wondering whether Adrian suspected my cover. Now I had proof that my identity inside North Point had existed before I officially arrived, and Adrian was behaving as if that fact belonged exactly where he expected it. I copied the report into the working file, careful not to let my hands move faster than normal. I would not confront him without knowing what he knew, but I was done explaining away the clues. By the time we left the archive, the trust between us felt real enough to hurt and false enough to be dangerous. Adrian had respected my refusal, trusted my judgment, and watched me choose not to steal from him. He had also looked at an impossible record carrying my alias and shown no surprise at all. I followed him into the elevator with one decision already made. Before I gave the Bureau another update, I was going to test the only assumption holding my cover together. I needed to know whether Adrian Cross had merely begun to suspect me, or whether he had known exactly who I was before I ever walked through his door. The elevator doors closed, and I stopped pretending I needed more proof. I pressed the emergency hold before we reached the next floor. Adrian glanced at the illuminated button, then at me. Subtle. I'm done being subtle. I pulled the copied access report from my briefcase and held it between us. My alias entered North Point's system 3 days before I walked into your office. Adrian looked at the page without taking it. No surprise. No confusion. Just that same unbearable calm. Yes. One word, and the floor seemed to shift beneath me. You created it. My security system did. Systems don't invent people. Neither do federal agencies, apparently. They recycle them. My hand tightened around the paper. That detail about the alias had never entered Adrian's files. It existed only in the Bureau's sealed preparation notes. Say my name. Adrian's gaze stayed on mine. Ethan Mercer. Hearing it in his voice felt worse than a weapon against my ribs. Evan Ward had been useful because he had no history, no guilt, no reason to care what Adrian thought of him. Ethan did. How long? I asked. Before you entered my lobby. Before the garage? Before you practiced not checking the cameras. Heat climbed into my face. Every careful movement from the past weeks rearranged itself at once. Adrian noticing the south entrance. The access card. The legal phrasing. The tea I actually drank. The way he had watched me refuse to condemn Ruiz. None of it had happened because my cover was working. You let me believe I was fooling you. You were fooling everyone else. That's your defense. It's a fact. I laughed once, without humor. You built my alias into North Point's network. Your identity would not have survived a Real security review without it. So you protected my cover. I protected my organization from reacting before I understood the threat. Me? Yes. The honesty should have helped. It didn't. I shoved the report against his chest. He took it before it fell, more reflex than acceptance. You searched me before I even arrived. I verified you. You knew I was a federal agent, gave me access to your records, and watched to see what I would steal. You did not steal the private correspondence. You were watching. I was paying attention. That's a cleaner word for manipulation. Something tightened in his jaw. The first visible crack in his control. You entered my life under a false name with the intention of collecting evidence against me. That was my job. And knowing who you were was mine. The answer hit because part of it was true. I had approached him to lie. I had used every ordinary conversation, every quiet meal, every moment of trust as access. But I had believed the dishonesty belonged to me. Finding out he had known made me feel exposed in a way being arrested never could. Was any of it real? I asked. The question escaped before I could make it sound professional. Adrian went still. Define real. The coffee. The sandwich. Bell. Ruiz. Letting your security chief walk out instead of searching me. Those things happened. That isn't what I asked. No, he said quietly. It isn't. The silence between us changed. For the first time since I had met him, Adrian looked like a man choosing words because the wrong ones might cost him something. I did not know what you would do once you had access, he said. I knew what your agency wanted. I knew what your cover claimed. I wanted to know which one mattered when you had to choose. So every decision was a test. At first, that answer hurt more than a denial. And after, his eyes held mine, but he did not answer quickly enough. I stepped closer. You don't get to study me, decide I'm interesting, and call that trust. I never called it trust. No, you just gave me unrestricted access and let me invent the rest. You had choices, not informed ones. Adrian's expression shifted. Barely, but he heard it. I saw that much. You're right, he said. I had expected an argument. The admission left me with nowhere easy to put my anger. You knew who I was and still kept me here. Yes. Why? Because removing you would have answered nothing. About the investigation? About you. The elevator hummed around us, suspended between floors. That's not enough, I said. I know. It was the closest he came to explaining, and I hated that part of me believed he meant it. I released the emergency hold. The elevator began moving again. When the doors opened onto the lobby, 2 of Adrian's security men were waiting. Their eyes moved from him to me, noting the distance between us, the report in his hand, the fact that neither of us looked calm. Adrian gave them no explanation. He simply said, Mr. Ward's access remains active. I turned on him. Don't. The guards glanced at each other. Adrian understood. Ethan's access remains active, he corrected. My real name in that lobby sounded like a line being crossed. I walked past him without saying goodbye. Outside, rain had started again, fine and cold against my face. My secure phone vibrated before I reached the corner. The message from my handler was brief. Update overdue. Confirm cover intact. I stared at the screen. The cover was gone. The mission was not. And whatever had formed between Adrian and me now sat in the worst possible place. Too real to dismiss, too manipulated to trust. I typed nothing. For the first time since the operation began, I no longer knew whether reporting the truth would protect my judgment or merely let someone else make the next decision for me. My handler's message stayed unanswered until the rain soaked through my coat and cold water ran down the back of my neck. Confirm cover intact. I stood beneath the awning of a closed pharmacy, staring at the words as if silence could keep the operation from changing. It couldn't. I typed, cover compromised. Target has known my identity since before contact. Operation remains active. The reply came less than a minute later. Report in person. Bring all North Point material. That was the correct instruction. It was also the first time the Bureau felt less like protection and more like a machine already deciding what my discovery meant. I reached the safe apartment 20 minutes later and found Adrian sitting in the hallway outside my door. No guards. No coat. A paper cup rested beside him on the carpet. Breaking into federal housing seems ambitious, I said. Your building manager accepted cash and poor judgment. That's comforting. It wasn't meant to be. He stood, leaving the cup where it was. Of course. Halcyon moved the next transfer window, he said. Tonight. You came here to discuss scheduling? I came because the data includes residential addresses. My irritation sharpened into focus. Whose? Employees. Families. Anyone connected to the compromised routes. Why would payment records contain home addresses? They don't. The addresses are leverage. That was the first useful thing anyone had given me since the elevator. I unlocked the apartment, but blocked the doorway. You knew my real name. You knew where I lived. I'm not letting you walk in like none of that matters. Adrian's eyes dropped briefly to my hand on the doorframe. Then I'll stay here. It should not have surprised me. It did. I stepped aside. 5 minutes. Generous. Don't get sentimental. Inside, Adrian remained near the door while I opened the North Point working files on an isolated laptop. He gave me a routing sequence that connected Halcyon's payment network to a private server I had not seen. The first directory contained names, addresses, medical records, school schedules, ordinary lives converted into pressure points. Noah Bell had not been an exception. He had been a method. If the Bureau seizes this without separating the personal data, everyone listed becomes exposed, I said. Including people who never worked for you. Yes. And you expect me to believe your concern is humanitarian? No, Adrian's answer was immediate. Some of those people are mine. Some are not. Halcyon will use all of them. Honest enough to be ugly. I respected it more than I wanted to. My secure phone vibrated on the counter. Report now. Adrian saw. The screen light up, but did not move closer. They want the files, he said. They want results. Is there a difference? There should be. He had thrown my own answer back at me. Under different circumstances, I might have laughed. Instead, I opened a blank transfer report and began typing. Adrian watched my hands. What are you telling them? That the operation is compromised. That ends your access. Probably. Then why are you still working? I looked at the list of children's addresses on the screen. Because ending my access and protecting these people are two different problems. For once, Adrian had no quick response. He removed a small hardware token from his pocket and set it beside the laptop. That will decrypt the residential directory. I stared at it. You're giving me the key? A temporary key. There it is. What? The part where trust arrives with an expiration date. His jaw tightened, but he did not take the token back. Use it. Copy the threat data. Keep it if you believe that protects them. And your organization? You will see routes, safe properties, and names I would prefer the federal government not possess. That sounds expensive. It is. I inserted the token. The directory opened completely. Adrian had just surrendered operational information that could cost him money, influence, and people's loyalty. It was not the evidence my task force wanted, but it was real leverage, offered without a demand. I copied only the threat records and the Halcyon routing data. I left Adrian's unrelated properties untouched. He noticed. You could take everything. I could. Why didn't you? Because I'm trying to stop pretending access and permission are the same thing. The room went quiet. Adrian's expression changed. Not softer, exactly, but less defended. Ethan. My real name sounded different when he wasn't using it to prove he had won. I am sorry, he said. No explanation followed. No request that I forgive him. The simplicity unsettled me more than an argument would have. I closed the directory and removed the token. That doesn't fix it. I know. And this doesn't mean I trust you. I know that too. My stomach chose that moment to growl loud enough to destroy whatever dignity remained. Adrian glanced toward the kitchen. Have you eaten? I'm in the middle of a moral crisis. Those require calories. Despite myself, I laughed. It came out tired and brief, but it was real. He found 2 protein bars in a cabinet, checked the expiration dates with the seriousness of a bomb technician, and handed me the less damaged one. We ate standing on opposite sides of the counter while the copied files encrypted. For a few minutes, nothing between us was solved, but nothing was being performed either. Then my phone vibrated again. Final notice. Report with actionable evidence by 8 a.m. Adrian, read my face, not the screen. You have a deadline. So do you. Halcyon's transfer window opens in 3 hours. I handed him back the temporary key. He did not take it. Keep it until the addresses are secured. Another advantage surrendered. Another choice offered. It gave me hope, which was dangerous because hope made partial honesty feel like enough. It wasn't. Adrian had trusted me with people's lives and pieces of his operation, but not with the truth at the center of it. I had told the Bureau my cover was broken, but not what Adrian had become to me. By dawn, we had protected the names on Halcyon's list and given each other one more reason not to walk away. We had also run out of space between what we felt and what we were still refusing to surrender. At 7:42 that morning, I sent the Bureau enough evidence to protect the people on Halcyon's list and not enough to hand Adrian crossover with them. My handler called before the upload finished. You were ordered to bring everything. The threat data is actionable. That wasn't the instruction. I watched the progress bar crawl across the secure laptop while Adrian stood at my kitchen window, giving me the illusion of privacy. The remaining files contain unrelated locations and identities, I said. People who aren't part of the investigation. You don't decide relevance in the field. That had once sounded like safety. Now it sounded like permission to stop thinking. Then review what I sent. Mercer, step away from Cross and report in person. Adrian glanced back when he heard his name. His expression gave nothing away, but he already knew how the call would end. I'll report when the addresses are secure. I disconnected before my handler could answer. It was the first direct order I had ever refused. The choice did not feel brave. It felt like stepping off a roof and discovering gravity had been waiting patiently. Adrian looked at the protein bar wrapper still sitting on the counter. Your breakfast appears to have survived the moral crisis. Barely. A resilient meal. The corner of my mouth moved before I could stop it. Then the secure laptop chimed. Halcyon's server had gone dark. Every live route disappeared at once. They know, I said. Adrian was already reaching for his phone. The families. My people are moving them. Your people. I turned toward him. You said we were securing the addresses. We did. No. You decided where everyone would go before I sent anything. He ended the call without making it. That small motion told me more than an argument would have. When? I asked. Before I came here. The warmth left the room. You already had relocation plans. I had contingencies. And you let me believe my report was part of the decision. It was part of the timing. That is not the same thing. Adrian set his phone down. The people on that list could not wait for your agency to debate jurisdiction. So you used the federal response to cover your move. He did not deny it. The answer sat between us in the silence. Halcyon had seen official pressure and pulled back while Adrian relocated the vulnerable people under its cover. Efficient, protective, manipulative. All three could be true at once. You gave me the temporary key because you knew what I would send, I said. I believed you would protect the personal data. You predicted me again. I trusted your judgment. No. You arranged the board so my judgment produced the result you wanted. His jaw tightened. The result was that innocent people are alive. And you still don't understand why that isn't enough. I closed the laptop. Adrian moved between me and the door, not threateningly, which somehow made it worse. The Bureau will remove you from the operation. That's my consequence. They may charge you for withholding evidence. Also mine. Halcyon knows someone accessed the directory. If they connect that access to you, still mine. Ethan. My name came out like a warning he wanted to turn into a request. I can move you tonight. I stared at him. There it is. What? The solution where you decide what happens to me. I'm trying to keep you alive. You're trying to keep me where the outcome can't surprise you. Adrian's face went still. I picked up the unrestricted access card from the counter and placed it between us. You knew who I was before I walked into your office. You chose which records I saw, which risks I understood, which choices were available, and then you called my decisions proof of character. They were also curated. He looked at the card but did not touch it. What do you want from me? The truth without a fence around it. You have more truth than anyone I've ever allowed near me. Allowed. I almost laughed, but there was nothing left in it. You still think trust is giving me a longer leash. Something crossed his face then, not anger. Recognition, sharp enough to hurt both of us. He stepped away from the door. You're free to leave. Freedom isn't meaningful when you've already decided what I'm allowed to know. I moved past him, then stopped with my hand on the knob. The paper cup he had brought sat untouched in the hallway, the tea gone cold. For one stupid second, I remembered him examining expired protein bars like my kitchen cabinets posed a tactical threat. The memory landed harder than the betrayal because it had been real. So had the sandwich in the archive. His quiet laugh. The way he had made his security chief ask instead of order. Real did not mean clean. It did not mean safe. I care about you, I said, because leaving another truth hidden would only repeat the thing I was condemning. Adrian did not move. That doesn't make this acceptable. His eyes closed for half a second. I know. And I won't let the Bureau decide for me just because it's easier than deciding myself. What will you do? I don't know. Yet. I opened the door. But it will be my choice. I walked away without the access card, the temporary key, or any promise that I would return. By the time I reached the stairs, the anger had burned down to something clearer. I did not need Adrian to be innocent in order to see him as human. I did not need the Bureau to be wrong in order to question how it used the truth. And I did not need to stop caring about him to refuse the structure he had built around us. Behind me, Adrian remained silent until I reached the landing. Ethan. I turned. He stood in the doorway with the black access card in one hand, but he was no longer offering it. Tomorrow, he said. My office. No guards. No conditions. Why? His grip tightened once, then relaxed. Because you were right. Explanation is just another form of control if I'm still choosing what you're allowed to decide. He did not ask whether I would come. For the first time, Adrian Cross left the next move entirely to me. The next morning, I walked into Adrian Cross's office knowing he might finally give me the truth, and knowing the truth could end both of us. There were no guards outside. No security chief waiting to search me. Even the private elevator accepted my old access card, though I had left it on my kitchen counter the day before. Adrian stood by the windows in the same charcoal suit he had worn the first time we met. A black document case rested on his desk. You came, he said. You left the choice to me. I'm trying to learn. Late start. I've had poor instruction. The dry answer almost made me smile. Almost. I stayed near the door. No guards. No conditions. That was the offer. Adrian nodded toward the case. It still is. I crossed the room but did not touch it. What's inside? The complete North Point ledger. Original transfer authorizations. Shell company ownership records. Payments to officials, security contractors, and people who handled problems I did not want attached to my name. He did not soften the language. There are also signed directives, he continued. Mine. The words settled between us. Not misunderstood orders. Not crimes committed by men acting without his knowledge. His decisions. His responsibility. Why keep records like that? I asked. Because power without records becomes mythology. Men begin claiming authority they never had. And because records give you leverage. Yes. Adrian reached into his pocket slowly and placed a hardware key beside the case. The encryption key is permanent. There is no remote wipe. No duplicate system that can invalidate the files after you open them. I looked at him. You expect me to believe that? No, he stepped away from the desk. Verify it. That was the first reward he gave me. Not reassurance, but room to doubt him. I opened the case. Inside were 2 encrypted drives, paper ledgers bearing original signatures, and a sealed envelope containing access credentials to servers located outside his organization. I connected the first drive to my isolated laptop. Hash values matched the copies listed in the paper index. The signatures aligned with records the Bureau had spent months trying to authenticate. One payment chain led from Adrian's holding companies to Halcyon Security. Another connected him directly to bribed officials and illegal surveillance. A third documented orders that had ruined lives even when no bodies appeared in the accounting. It was real. More than real. It was enough to dismantle his organization and put Adrian in a courtroom with nowhere to hide. My hands went cold. You knew what I was from the beginning, I said. Yes. You knew this was what I came for. Yes. And now you're handing it to me. Adrian met my eyes. Yes. No explanation. No speech. Just the truth, stripped of every place he normally hid control. I closed the laptop halfway. What do you want in return? Nothing. That isn't how you operate. It is how I'm operating now. No protection? No promise about what I send. No request that I stay. His face changed then. Small but real. Wanting you to stay and requiring it are different things. I looked down at the evidence. Every version of Adrian existed inside that case. The man who protected Noah's brother, the man who respected my refusal, the man who had manipulated every path around me, and the man who had authorized crimes. Because power made cruelty efficient. Love did not erase any of it. Neither did anger. Why me? I asked. Adrian's answer came quietly. Because you saw what I was responsible for and still refused to stop seeing me as human. Because you protected people you had never met, even when your agency wanted the whole machine at once. And because if I chose someone who could not destroy me, it would not be trust. That was the answer I had been chasing since the first access card slid across his desk. He had kept me close first to study me, then because I complicated him, and finally because he believed I would use the truth without turning every person attached to it into collateral. It did not excuse the tests. It made this choice understandable. Adrian moved toward the door. I'll leave you alone. Where will you go? Nowhere you cannot find me. You're not running? That would make this another performance. He paused beside me. Whatever you choose, Ethan, let it be yours. Then he walked out. I sat alone with enough evidence to destroy him and opened my secure bureau channel. My handler answered immediately. Mercer, where are you? With actionable evidence. Send everything. I looked at the ledgers, then at the separate directory containing uninvolved families, coerced employees, and protected locations. I'm sending the criminal records, ownership chains, authorizations, and signed directives, I said. The civilian data is being segregated under protective review. You don't set those terms. I do on this transfer. Mercer, I'm also attaching a full account of my compromised cover, withheld materials, and every order I disobeyed. Silence. That confession could end my career. It might do worse. But I was done asking institutions or powerful men to carry the moral weight of choices I had made. I authenticated the evidence, attached the protected data index, and pressed send. The upload began. 30 seconds later, the bureau channel locked my credentials, and issued an emergency notice confirming warrants were being prepared. Across the city, Adrian's financial network started freezing account by account. I found him in the empty conference room, standing beside 2 untouched cups of tea. "It's done," I said. Adrian looked at me, then at the secure phone no longer accepting my access code. "And you?" "Under review. Probably suspended. Possibly charged." "I'm sorry." "So am I." Neither of us reached for the tea. Nothing between us was safe, solved, or forgiven. But for the first time, nothing was hidden and no one had controlled the other's answer. Adrian had handed me the power to destroy him. I had used it without pretending destruction was the only consequence that mattered. Outside the windows, sirens began moving toward the building, and Adrian stayed exactly where he had promised I would find him. The sirens reached Adrian's building 3 minutes after I told him it was done. He looked toward the elevator, then picked up one of the untouched cups of tea and held it out to me. "You should drink this before they confiscate it as evidence." I stared at him. "That may be the worst attempt at humor you've made. I've had a difficult morning." I took the cup. It was already cold. Somehow, that made it worse. The elevator doors opened, and federal agents filled the hallway with weapons raised and voices sharpened by procedure. Adrian placed both hands where they could see them. He did not move toward me, ask for protection, or use my name as leverage. When they ordered him to his knees, he obeyed. My handler came in behind them, took one look at the open evidence case, and then at my dead secure phone. "Badge and weapon, Mercer." I set both on the table. Adrian glanced at the badge, not at me. That restraint was the last proof I needed that the choice he had given me was real. They let him pass me in handcuffs. At the elevator, he stopped only because an agent checked the restraint on his wrist. Our eyes met. For months, I had watched him for signs of guilt, weakness, deception, anything I could use. He had watched me for the moment I would stop letting other people decide who I was. There was nothing left to hide behind now. "Ethan," he said. "Just my name. No instruction. No request." "Adrian," I answered. Then the elevator took him away. The evidence did exactly what he had known it would do. North Point. Accounts froze before noon. Search warrants reached Halcyon offices, private servers, and the officials whose names appeared beside Adrian's signatures. The protected directory allowed the Bureau to move the families Adrian had already relocated into formal protection without exposing their locations. Noah Bell and his brother disappeared into that system by choice, not because either Adrian or the government decided they belonged there. Daniel Ruiz was cleared. People who had been treated like leverage finally became people again. Adrian did not. He remained responsible for every directive bearing his name. He refused to challenge the authenticity of the ledgers, and he did not let his attorneys portray the handover as coercion, confusion, or a romantic act meant to excuse him. He cooperated where the records could prevent further harm. He accepted that cooperation did not erase what he had done. My own review lasted 12 weeks. I spent most of them in a windowless office answering the same questions in slightly different language. Why had I withheld unrelated data? Why had I disobeyed extraction orders? Why had I continued contact after my cover was compromised? Why had I trusted Adrian Cross? I didn't. I told the review panel the first time. By the final hearing, I understood the answer better. I trusted specific choices, I said. And I took responsibility when those choices were wrong. They suspended me from field operations and placed a formal reprimand in my record. I kept my job, though not the version of it I had built my identity around. I could have appealed. I didn't. Losing control of the outcome did not mean I had lost myself. 3 months after Adrian's arrest, I visited him for the first time. The room had gray walls, a bolted table, and no private elevator. He wore a plain dark shirt that made him look less powerful and more dangerous in a different way, like a man who could no longer make the room obey him and had finally stopped trying. I sat across from him. He looked at the vending machine coffee in my hand. "You still don't drink it." "I'm preserving a tradition." Wastefulness. Suspicion. The faint smile that followed was tired but real. For a moment, I remembered the conference room, 2 untouched cups between us, both of us pretending attention was not intimacy. "Your plea hearing is next month," I said. "I know. The cooperation agreement won't protect you from everything." It shouldn't. There was no performance in the answer. No attempt to make accountability attractive. He had lost his organization, his money, his ability to control who entered the room and when they left. What remained was the choice to tell the truth without bargaining for the reward. I'm not here to forgive everything, I said. I know. And I don't know what our future looks like. Adrian rested his hands flat on the table. Neither do I. That must be painful for you. Excruciating. I laughed, and this time neither of us treated it like a mistake. Then his expression grew serious. You can stop coming. It was not a test. I had learned the difference. I know. You can decide later that this costs too much. I know that too. He waited. Months earlier, he would have filled the silence, shaped the options, or made staying easier than leaving. Now he let the uncertainty belong to both of us. I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. He did not close his fingers around mine until I turned my palm and chose the contact. I'm here today, I said. Adrian looked down at our hands, then back at me. Today is honest. It was not a promise that love would save him from consequence. It was not a promise that my career, his sentence, or the damage between us would become simple. It was smaller than that and harder to fake. The man I had entered his world to observe had finally allowed himself to be seen without controlling what I did with the truth. And I had learned that integrity was not the absence of feeling. It was the decision to face what I felt, what I knew, and what my choices cost. Adrian had handed me the evidence that destroyed the life he built. I had used it. He had stayed. So had I. Not because either of us was trapped, forgiven, or guaranteed an ending, but because for the first time, leaving and staying were equally possible. Love had not erased the consequences. It had made an honest choice possible.